What's the best, can't speak. What's the best graphics card to buy in August of 2024? Well, that depends on your price range. So we're gonna break it down by where's your budget, what's the best value there. Also, there are some game bundles to be aware of. NVIDIA's game bundle for Black Myth Wukong has like a couple of days left, goes through August 20th, so by the time you're watching this video, that one might be wiped out. And that's for GPUs, basically 40 series, 4070 and up. AMD has some game bundles as well, with a variety of their GPUs and CPUs, getting Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 and Unknown 9 Awakening. However, if you look at the 7800 XT and 7700 XT specifically, they have a game bundle previously that goes through the end of August, August 31st. They can get you 2 out of these 4 games in most regions, including Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora, Starfield, Company of Heroes 3, and Lies of P. So potentially, if you're buying one of those 2 graphics cards, you could get 4 games along with it. However, how do you value game bundles when making a GPU purchase? That really depends on if those are games you would have actually wanted to buy. That's the only way that it's actually saving you money. But first, we need to talk about a huge mistake so many people make when they upgrade their gaming PC setup, and that is they do not think about the chair they will be sitting in the entire time they will be using it, and that is absolutely crucial. Your lower back will thank you if you get a high quality ergonomic chair like the one I got from FlexiSpot with their C7 ergonomic chair when they sponsored me a couple of months ago, and today they just want me to update you on how it's gone. Well, it has been great for my lower back. My favorite thing about this chair is the self-adaptive back support that you can tune to your liking, along with all of the other adjustability. It's amazing to be able to get a chair that can just fit you just right and give you that proper support. The downside has been that my wife liked it so much, it's ended up in her classroom. So luckily, FlexiSpot has ended up giving me another C7, and the only difference I made, because I love the C7 so much, was I did get the mesh bottom instead of the foam bottom this time, because I really like the breathability of the mesh. That has been really nice. And the best news is FlexiSpot is having an anniversary sale up to 60% off now, and a chance to win free orders. Use my exclusive code C782150 to purchase the C7 now. For more amazing discounts, just click the FlexiSpot link in the pinned comment and/or video description. Now in this video, we're gonna look by price point what makes the most sense. So we will hop into the 7700 XT and 7800 XT after we talk about the kind of lower tier price point, because I think honestly, a lot of people are just looking for a graphics card that can play games and it's like not too crazy expensive, like under 200 bucks. And I recently revisited this price segment and I found that if you have to be under $200, AMD's RX 6600 makes a lot of sense. It can still play a lot of games pretty well for $180. And what's its competition? That's the important thing. Well, NVIDIA's really only got the RTX 3050 in this price point. It has a 6GB model, which is not very interesting unless you need a GPU that doesn't need a power connector plugged into it, because it's significantly less powerful than the 8GB model, which is still coming in at a minimum of about $200 and goes up from there. So it's more expensive than a 6600 and performs worse. Intel has an Arc A750 in this price point, coming in as low as $190, and then usually about $200. However, while it gets some wins against the 6600 also gets some wins against it, and I found a more consistent gaming experience on the AMD product, so that's the one I would recommend there. And I'll also mention that if you can go a little bit over that $200 price point, AMD's 6650 XT at $220 does get you almost 20% more performance, and AMD's 7000 series card, the RX 7600, is finally starting to be available, at least on certain models, as low as about $230. And all of those, I think, make pretty good value. But $230, you're kind of straying up a bit past where I was originally saying. So if you have to be under $200, that RX 6600 makes a lot of sense. And again, if you have to go over it, the 6650 XT at $220 makes sense, or the 7600 if it's as low as about the 6650 XT. I would not pay much more for it, as they're pretty similar performance. Now, if we look at the next price point up, we're kind of looking at getting to around that $300 mark, maybe a little bit below, and NVIDIA's offering comes in with the RTX 4060 as their lowest priced 40 series model. You can occasionally get them as low as about $280 that I'm seeing right now, but more often they're closer to $290 or $300. And what is the competition? Well, I don't think AMD's current gen competition is particularly strong against it. You can go with the 7600 XT, which does get you 16 gigabytes of VRAM, but it goes up to about $320. And I actually think AMD's previous generation offering is more compelling, with the 6750 XT coming in at about $309, and a few percent slower version with the 6700 XT coming in at $290, although availability on those can be a little hit or miss. The 6700 XT is noticeably faster than an RTX 4060, and the 6750 XT would be an additional 5 or 6% faster due to faster memory clocks. Now, I think that it's going to be the better value, because if you're looking at the AMD versus NVIDIA debate, there's some big feature set differences for gaming, and gaming is where I'm focusing on for this video. In gaming, the biggest differences are upscaling techniques with DLSS versus FSR, and then ray tracing performance. And with ray tracing performance, I just think you need a more powerful graphics cards than the RTX 4060 to really enjoy the heavy-duty ray tracing effects. And so that's, I don't find super compelling at this price point. At the higher tiers, then we'll talk a bit more. But at the lower tiers, having some better upscaling available would be kind of nice, so that can be a bit of a selling point for the RTX 4060. However, having only 8 gigabytes of VRAM isn't great, whereas the 6750 XT and 6700 XT offer 12 gigabytes of VRAM, so that's 50% more VRAM, and we are seeing signs of 8 gigabyte graphics cards running out of VRAM, even at 1080p resolution, playing at high settings, which of course you can turn down, but those are settings that the GPU is otherwise powerful enough to use. And again, you're just getting more raw performance from the 6750 XT and 6700 XT, so less likely to need upscaling in the first place. So my money here would be on the 6750 XT or 6700 XT at that $300 price point. Now, if you move up into the mid $300 range, things get a lot more complicated. So from NVIDIA, you have the 4060 Ti 8 gigabyte version, which comes in at $370. But again, $370, and you still only have 8 gigabytes of VRAM, which we have seen cause some issues. I still don't think we're at a performance tier where ray tracing is a just absolute major selling point, although it's getting a bit more usable in some titles. Now, from AMD's current generation, you would have the 7700 XT, which is currently priced at $375. So very, very similar when comparing lowest priced models between the 7700 XT and the 4060 Ti 8 gigabyte. The 7700 XT is offering 12 gigabytes of VRAM, so you're less likely to run into those VRAM concerns, especially if you're playing these at 1440p resolution. And the 7700 XT is just significantly faster. Meaning that, again, what about, upscaling and things like that, DLSS versus FSR? DLSS does look better than FSR, but you're just less likely to need it on the 7700 XT given its raw performance lead. So we're also having those game bundles right now, so if you cared about any of those, the 7700 XT was one of the GPUs where, at least through the end of August, you're going to be able to get not only Warhammer 40k, Space Marine 2, and Unknown 9 Awakening, but also 2 of the 4 games, Liza P. Company Heroes of 3, Starfield, and Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. However, that's not necessarily saying that the 7700 XT is the GPU you should buy, because at least in regions where it's still available, AMD's 6800 non-XT from the previous generation performs extremely similarly to the 7700 XT, comes in at a bit less money at $360, and it actually has 16 gigabytes of VRAM instead of 12, and doubling the 4060 Ti 8 gigabytes VRAM capacity. So the 6800 non-XT, if it's available at a lower price or similar price in your region, could be pretty compelling as long as you weren't sold on some of those game bundles, which you would be missing out on. Again, the 6800 and 7700 XT are going to perform very similarly, although again, you get that little bit extra VRAM and a slightly lower price on the 6800, lose out on the game bundles right now and all of that. Now, if you're pushing into the $400 range, well, you got to get a little over 400 before you see the next NVIDIA GPU. The next NVIDIA GPU is the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte. And now it's like, well, yes, we finally fixed the VRAM issue. We have 16 gigabytes of VRAM. The problem is the price is up to $439. And that means that in price competition, you would be comparing this against either AMD's 6800 XT, if it is still available in your region. I can find one available today as low as $430 in the United States. And the 6800 XT also has 16 gigabytes of VRAM and is just significantly more powerful than the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte. In fact, the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte isn't even more powerful than the 4060 Ti 8 gigabyte. It only performs better in situations where your VRAM buffer would be going beyond that 8 gigabytes, and the system would have to go into, look into system RAM instead of VRAM and kind of slow down for all of that. So the 6800 XT coming in at a bit less money and significantly more performance and the same amount of VRAM. Again, we're not at a point where I think that those heavy-duty ray tracing effects are that compelling. In lighter ray tracing workloads, the 6800 XT just has enough of a raw performance lead that it can kind of keep up. And again, if we're talking upscaling, if you have enough raw performance to just not need to use upscaling or use upscaling as heavily, that does kind of make up for that. No, the 6800 XT, as I can see here, supply on that is kind of drying up, so maybe you're in a region where that's not available. We'll then check the newer generation 7800 XT. But that's coming in at $480, and honestly, there's not a huge performance difference between the 6800 XT and the 7800 XT. The 7800 XT is a little bit better, but again, this is more money. And the 7800 XT, though, was one of those GPUs that came with both current AMD game bundles if you're buying, the older game bundle is still available until August 31st. So if some of those games were interesting to you and that kind of sweetens the deal, then maybe the newer generation 7800 XT could make sense in that price range. But again, now we're kind of pushing into the almost $500 price point as well. So perhaps we should address that. If you're pushing into that $500 price range, NVIDIA offers the RTX 4070 with the lowest priced models available at $520, and then kind of going up to $540, $545, $550, kind of from there. So the 4070 does have 12 gigabytes of VRAM now, which I think for 1080p and 1440p gaming isn't a huge problem right now. Some games, especially at 1440p, can at their absolute max settings push right up to or even a little bit beyond 12 gigabytes of VRAM, but in most of my testing, it's not really an issue right now. The question is, compared to 16 gigabyte graphics cards, in the long run, games tend to use more VRAM as time goes on, things like that. But I haven't found a major issue with 12 gigabytes of VRAM right now. Now, it is costing more than the 7800 XT though, which means that it's actually from a pricing competition pit more heavily against the 7900 GRE. The 7900 GRE coming in as low as $530 right now, then with more models at $540 and $550. So it's priced pretty similarly to the 4070. The 7900 GRE is faster than a 7800 XT and especially kind of scales a little better in ray tracing workloads. So in the lighter ray tracing workloads, it's not competing too badly against the 4070. And in the heaviest ray tracing workloads, I'm not incredibly sold on the 4070's performance there. So here again, I think the 7900 GRE, when paired right up against that 4070, I think puts up a really good fight for itself. And ray tracing performance a bit hit or miss here. If you're willing to upscale really aggressively, maybe the 4070's there. So you could have a little bit of personal preference on this one. Yeah, I think I'd probably lean towards the 7900 GRE. However, past this point is where I think NVIDIA starts getting a lot more competitive, because I know some people are watching the video up to this point and they're like, wow, this guy's just gonna advertise the AMD product at every single price point. And no, I just think at the lower price points, I'm less sold on ray tracing as a feature set, and I think AMD is priced more competitively. Past this, the next model up from NVIDIA would be the 4070 Super. Now the 4070 Super is available at $580 and up. A lot of models still sitting at about $600. The 4070 Super is noticeably faster than the base 4070. And when I've put it head-to-head against the 7900 GRE, other than the fact that the 4070 Super is 12 gigabytes of VRAM instead of 16, which again, I'm not finding to be a massive issue in the games I'm actually testing right now. I actually think I would slightly prefer the 4070 Super. It's starting to win in those ray tracing situations, and the non-RT situations are close enough that I don't think it's a major difference. We're also getting to the point where again, performance is close enough here that I think those feature set advantages with DLSS, better performance in some ray tracing situations and enough performance to use some of those ray tracing workloads. I think I'd have a slight preference for the 4070 Super, but it is a bit more expensive than that 7900 GRE. So if you can get to $600, I would prefer the 4070 Super over the 7900 GRE, but if you can't stretch your budget that high, that's where that 7900 GRE saves you a bit of money. Now, past this point, the next NVIDIA GPU is the 4070 Ti. However, this one's actually kind of discontinued in production, but there's still a lot available on the market. It's still a 12 gigabyte card, and now you're spending over $700, and that feels really bad. And it's been kind of supplanted by the 4070 Ti Super. The 4070 Ti Super is more money, but we're talking, it was $730 for the non-Super and $780 for the Super. The Super gets you more performance and 16 gigabytes of VRAM, so it kind of solves that VRAM issue. And it's powerful enough to really use those heavy-duty ray tracing effects, especially at 1440p resolution. You have enough VRAM that you're not really super concerned about that. So if you're looking for an NVIDIA GPU beyond the 4070 Super, I think the 4070 Ti Super can make sense because it solves a lot of those issues. However, you do have the AMD competition up here with their 7900 XT coming in at just under $700. The 7900 XT, if you're not interested in those kind of ray tracing feature sets, has come down in price enough that, it's $100 less than the 4070 Ti Super. At $100 less, it offers very similar and sometimes better rasterized performance, meaning non-ray tracing performance. But it does have the weaker upscaler, so if you're planning to play at like 4K resolution, for example, I think these GPUs would be relying on upscaling quite frequently, in which case having access to the better upscaler might be a reason to consider that NVIDIA product at the 4070 Ti Super. Now, again, though, for a lot of people, saving $100 to get similar, if not a little bit better, non-ray tracing performance, so if you're not, could make sense on that 7900 XT. So it's certainly not a bad choice. So if you have to buy at about $700, 7900 XT makes sense. If you can stretch your budget up to a little under $800, then the 4070 Ti Super, while not getting a lot more raw performance, can kind of justify itself in terms of the bigger feature set, better upscaler, really usable ray tracing performance, especially at 1440p resolution. Now, the thing is, though, that we're starting to get to around $800, and especially if we look beyond this point, we do have to think about the next generation of graphics cards is likely coming soon. So the rumors right now are a bit conflicting on whether we'll actually get the 50 series from NVIDIA at the end of 2024 or the beginning of 2025. However, the point is, either way, that's, a few months out. We're not talking years. Now, it'll probably be the highest end GPUs coming first, like the 5090 and 5080, maybe at the same time, maybe spaced out a month apart. Kind of, again, depends on what NVIDIA decides to do, and the rumors are a bit conflicting on that. But the point is, the high-end GPUs are coming first. So as you start pushing up into that maybe $1,000 and up price point where we would probably expect a 5080 and 5090 to be, it starts to make maybe less sense to buy one of those graphics cards right now. So 4070 Ti Super at almost $800 is already kind of pushing it. However, that $800 price point might not be the initial launch wave of 50 series GPUs, so it might give you a few months before it gets, a few more months before it gets supplanted. But if you're looking at buying something beyond this point, like a 4080 or 4080 Super, which perform similarly and are also priced pretty similarly at this point, you're pushing into, okay, $960, $1,000, basically the $1,000 price point. And again, it's possible that we'll get a 5080 at around this price point with better performance, you know, in a few months. So if it, you know, I'm not sure I'd really recommend buying GPUs at this point. However, if you do want to buy a GPU right now, you're like, I don't really care if it gets supplanted, I want something now, okay. So if you're buying something at around $1,000, the 4080 Super comes in at $960, and then $1,000 for most models. The 7900 XTX from AMD does undercut the pricing down to about $910, $920. For me, at this price point, that's not enough of a difference to recommend the 7900 XTX because, again, the non-ray tracing performance compared to the 4080 Super is very similar. Sometimes XTX is a little bit ahead, but not massively so and not, you know, super noticeably so. But when you get to those heavier ray tracing workloads, the 4080 Super has the performance to use them, has a massive performance lead, and has a better upscaler. So if you're playing at 4K resolution, I think you will be relying on upscalers in a lot of cases in the latest AAA games. So the 4080 Super would get me my recommendation here over the 7900 XTX. I just think there needs to be more price separation there for the 7900 XTX to make sense. Now, if you're going beyond this point, the most powerful graphics card available right now is the 4090. It takes a massive step up in price with the lowest price models at like $1,700, and they go up from there. But the 4090 is definitely noticeably faster. Now, it's not good value. You're not, you know, you're maybe spending 70% more money compared to a 4080 Super and maybe getting 30 or so % more performance. So it's not an absolutely you know, great value deal, but it certainly pays off in, you know, if you're playing at 4K resolution, you want to push the latest, you know, heavy duty RT effects and things like that, which you'll still be relying on upscaling for at 4K resolution, but having that extra headroom can certainly pay off. So let's do a quick summary of today's video. Maybe let's do it kind of backwards. At the absolute highest price points, I don't think it makes a lot of sense to buy right now if you're worried about your purchase being supplanted by something that's better value coming out at the end of 2024 or beginning of 2025. That being said, the 4090 is the most powerful graphics card available right now. Nothing else is super direct competitor, but it's extremely expensive. There you go. If you're buying around $1,000, again, I think the 4080 Super is a better deal than the 7900 XTX, given that there's not a massive pricing difference and there's a better feature set and way more usable ray tracing performance there. If you're going down to around the $800 price point, the 4070 Ti Super really competes pretty well against cards like the 4080. It can still give you a lot of the you know, big ray tracing effects, especially if you're playing at 1440p. It has 16 gigabytes of VRAM, so I think it can make sense there. But if you need to save $100, the 7900 XT makes the most sense at around the $700 price point, as long as you're not interested in using the heaviest ray tracing effects, where it does fall behind. Below this point, I think the 4070 Super makes sense, which is available at about $580, and is really the least expensive NVIDIA GPU that I think makes a lot of sense to buy. Below this point, that's where I think the AMD graphics cards started to make more sense. If you're spending a little over $500, I think the 7900 GRE makes better sense than the 4070 non-super at about the same price point. If you're buying a little over $400 and you're in a market where it's available, the 6800 XT from AMD was a lot more performance at about $430 than the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte, so I think that made the most sense. In the $300 to $400 price range, I think the 7700 XT makes sense if you want those game bundles, and if the previous generation 6800 isn't available, but if the 6800 non-XT is available at $360 in your region, and you're not super hung up on those game bundles, the 16 gigabytes of VRAM and about the same performance of the 7700 XT at about the same price or even a little bit less, I think makes that the 6800 my recommendation in the $300 to $400 price range. If you're buying right around $300, I think the 6750 XT or the 6700 XT make the most sense, as they're more powerful than a 4060, and we're at a place where I don't think I'm super swayed by ray tracing performance. So I think they're better value than that 4060. If you're buying around $200, the 7600 can make sense at about $230, but most models are more expensive than that. So you're more likely to grab something like a 6650 XT at about $220. And if you absolutely have to be under the $200 mark, the RX 6600 makes sense at $180, outclassing the NVIDIA competition with the RTX 3050 in the price range, and being a little more consistent in performance than the Intel competition with the Arc A750. All right, hopefully you guys found today's video useful and or interesting, going through all of the various price points and deals and game bundles and whatnot, and making those recommendations. If you want to support the channel, you can click the join button down below, and don't forget to check out the FlexiSpot chair in the video description.